Story 1. I had been using Craigslist to get rid of some old stuff that had been sitting and used around my house. My name is Daniel, and since I was planning to move in a few months, I figured it was a good time to sort through my things and separate what I needed from what I didn't. That's when I came across my old motor tools. They were still in great shape and fully functional, but I had recently upgraded to battery-powered ones. Since I no longer needed the old set, I snapped a few photos and listed them on Craigslist. I posted a power drill, a driver, and a matching tool set for $80. Given their condition and quality, I thought it was a fair price. I started getting responses within an hour. One person offered me $50, which I politely declined. The other said he was very interested and wanted to come by that same evening to buy them at the listed price. I told him I was available around 5 and that he could stop by then. I've never let strangers into my house for these kinds of transactions. I always bring the items outside and meet people in my driveway. It's a busy street, so I felt safe doing that. Like always, I planned to be outside a little before 5 to make things quick and easy. But at about 4:30, there was an unexpected knock on the door. I looked out and saw a man standing there with a red car parked in the driveway. I opened the door slightly and asked who he was. He said he was there for the Craigslist tools and admitted he was a bit early. I asked him to wait in his car since I wasn't quite ready yet. He hesitated for a moment, making things a bit uncomfortable, but then walked back to his vehicle. Once he left the porch, I gathered the tools and met him at the top of the driveway. I even had an outdoor outlet ready so he could test them, and everything seemed fine. Then he looked at me and said, "How about 20?" while holding the drill. I replied, "The deal was 80. I can go a little lower, but 20 is too low." I was annoyed, especially since he'd already agreed to the full price. Without saying another word, he set the drill down, turned around, and drove off. I felt frustrated and confused, like I'd just been messed with. I brought everything back inside and tried to move on with my evening. It was just a minor inconvenience, or so I thought. A few hours later, as I walked past my front windows, I spotted what looked like that same red car parked down the street, 3 houses away. I looked closer, trying to be sure. The car was empty, so I couldn't say for certain it was his. I brushed it off as coincidence and went on with my night. About an hour later, I was eating and watching TV when someone knocked on the door again. It startled me, but I chose to ignore it, hoping whoever it was would go away. My first thought was that it might be the same guy. Then, just 30 seconds later, another knock, louder this time, came, followed by a voice, "Hey, it's me." I decided I'll take the tools. I brought the money. I didn't believe a word of it. It all clicked in my mind. The red car from earlier must have been his, meaning he'd been hanging around my neighborhood for hours. I didn't answer. Instead, I called the police and gave them his name and a description of the car. He called out a few more times, claiming he wanted to buy the tools, then went silent. I stayed near the couch, watching the front door. A minute or two passed. I wasn't sure what to do next. The police were on their way, which gave me some reassurance, so I decided to check the window near the door. Just as I reached it, a loud thud hit the side of the house, followed by rustling leaves and quick footsteps. I looked outside and saw the man limping away toward his car. Luckily, the police arrived just in time and caught him before he could get far. What shocked me most was what he confessed. He admitted he had planned to rob me, but because I didn't let him inside, he had to improvise. He tried to climb a tree by the side of my house to jump onto the roof, but he missed and fell, injuring his leg. Even worse, he was armed with a knife. And the spot he tried to reach was right below my second-story window, which I later realized had been left unlocked. If he'd made the jump, he could have gotten inside. He claimed it was just an attempted robbery, but who really knows what else he had planned. After that, I stopped using Craigslist. And ever since that night, I make sure every single window in my house is locked, even the ones that seem impossible to reach. Story 2 by Ethan Carter. Several years ago, I used Craigslist to search for a room to rent. I wanted a place where I could split the cost with a roommate or two. After about a week of searching and multiple calls with a potential landlord, I finally found a spot that seemed right for me. The owner, who was to be my roommate, seemed like a really normal, nice guy who was similar in age as me. He told me all about the place and what to expect, and I also felt like we connected well. With everything seeming perfect, I was getting really excited. I didn't have much to move, so I packed it all up and stuffed it in the trunk of my car, and in just a few days, I drove out 30 minutes to my soon-to-be home. It was located outside of the main town and in more of a woodsy terrain. It had a long driveway leading far from the road. Pulling in, though, it was not as I'd expected. It was a very old wooden home. I knew it was passed down from his parents, but this place looked to be at least 100 years old. The pictures of the inside that I'd seen on Craigslist looked to be fairly modern, so I assumed they had to have done some pretty big renovations. I left everything in my car as I went up to the door and knocked. Lucas, the owner, came and showed me around. While the outside was not so impressive, the inside was the opposite. Very well maintained, clean, and definitely had been renovated not long ago. I was really happy with everything and moved my things in that night. Several days went by with no issues. It didn't even feel like I'd found this place on Craigslist. It felt like I was just living with a friend. Lucas worked in town though, so he was gone most of the time, and I worked from home, so I got to have the whole house to myself. Well, not the whole house. There was one door that was always locked. It wasn't any of my business, and I knew that, so I never brought it up with Lucas. But it still got me wondering. It was almost definitely the basement door, but this was odd because he said the house was a one-story home, not mentioning anything about having a basement. Another couple of days went by before something happened. Lucas brought home some fast food for dinner and then went to bed early because he had work the next day. I stayed up a while longer, then did the same. Laying in bed though, I had trouble falling asleep. There wasn't any reason for this, it was just one of those nights. But after a while, I heard Lucas's bedroom door open. I was listening because there was nothing else to do, but no sounds came. I waited a whole 2 or 3 minutes before he started walking slowly down the hall toward my door. Just as he was passing though, he stopped. I heard the floorboards creak, followed by the door thumping softly as if he was pressing up against it. He stayed there behind the door for a while, I don't even know how long, but then he walked away. Not back toward his room, but the other way toward the main hallway. Then a door opened and closed. I didn't know what to think. It was really weird and creepy, but also I'd known Lucas for a while now and didn't see him as a weird person. But what was he doing? And where did he go? I stayed awake as long as I could, waiting to hear him come back, but he never did. Over the next few nights, I noticed the pattern. Every time I would go to bed, about 30 minutes later, Lucas would open his door, stand still for a minute, then walk to my door, stand still again, then leave and go into the locked door. He never slept in his room, he always slept somewhere behind the weird locked door. What made it so creepy was that he was trying so hard to keep a secret from me. I decided one night that I was going to figure this all out because I was beginning to feel unsafe. I went to bed and waited for Lucas to do his usual routine. He opened his bedroom door and walked over to mine, then as soon as I heard him unlock and open the other door, I got up and quickly went into the hallway, catching him standing by the open door. He looked back at me, clearly startled. "Hey, is everything okay, Lucas?" I asked. He just stared at me, eyes still open wide from the scare I gave him. "Why do you keep going to that door every night?" I broke the silence, getting impatient. We were standing on opposite sides of the long, dark hallway, but I could sense that something was wrong with him. We stared at each other, still, and I took a step closer. "Lucas." As soon as I spoke his name, he ran around the corner and straight to the back door, opening it and continuing to run for the trees. I looked out the back door, seeing him disappear into the dark woods. I was shaking, horrified at what just happened. I have no words to describe the unknown thoughts running through my head. I closed the back door, then grabbed a knife from the kitchen and walked over to the door Lucas had opened. It was, in fact, a basement, but there was no light switch and it clearly had not been renovated like the rest of the house. The walls were old, decaying wood. I debated whether or not to go down. I was so intrigued and curious but terrified as well. The longer I stood there, the more afraid I became. I turned and ran back to my room, packed everything I could into 2 suitcases, stuffed them in my car and drove away, never looking back. I never talked to Lucas again and he never tried to contact me either. I didn't know what was going on with him or what he was doing in that house, but I didn't want to be involved. After a while, I forgot about it, but almost 5 years later, I found myself wondering about it again. I looked up the house online and found some strange things. It had been torn down years ago. There was an article from 5 years ago, just a few months after I left, stating that the house was abandoned. To me, this meant that when Lucas ran away that night, he never came back. I kept reading, and it stated that the house was torn down due to what they described as criminal findings. It didn't go into any more detail about what those criminal findings were. This really had me shaken up for a few weeks. Things like this probably wouldn't happen nowadays, but you can never be too careful. Story 3 by Walter. I'm a 25-year-old male, and this happened to me 3 years ago. I had just signed the lease for a small house in the town I lived in. Having been living in an apartment for a few years, I didn't have a lot of furniture or large house decorations to fill the space in my rental. While I had a decent-sized couch and TV stand, I only had a mini TV that I wanted to put up in my bedroom since it was so small. Not having a ton of money to work with though, I took to Craigslist to find a larger TV for the living room. I found a few nice flat-screen TVs listed on the site, but they were all over my budget and honestly a lot nicer than I actually needed. I just wanted a large TV to fill the space in my living room. I didn't actually care about the quality of the picture on the TV. Anyway, I finally found one that seemed to work with what I needed. It was cheap, large, and was said to be in working condition. It was an old flat-screen TV from probably 10 years ago. Compared to today, they aren't even considered flat screens anymore, as they're usually 3 to 4 inches thick and really heavy. I sent the owner an email and continued with my search. Finding nothing else worth looking into, I just hoped for the best with that one TV. It wasn't until the following morning that I received a response to my email. The owner introduced himself as Ryan and said he'd love to show me the TV whenever I was available. I don't know if I just read it in a weird way or what, but he seemed to be over the top excited about this. It made me a little uncomfortable, but I just figured it was a happy old man or something. I said I could do any day this week after I got off work at 6, and Ryan said tomorrow at 6:30 would be perfect for him, leaving his address at the bottom of the email along with a Google Calendar invite to an event labeled Craigslist TV. I accepted it, though I wasn't really sure what the purpose of it was, and it was definitely not a normal thing people do, but it didn't affect me in any way. I got my truck emptied out, and the next day I went to work, then went straight to his address afterwards. It was dark out by now, and when I pulled into his driveway, I saw all the lights were on inside. I checked one last time to make sure I had all the cash on hand, then got out of my truck and went to the front door. Walking up, I could see that the front door was partially open. There was no screen door or anything, just one main door. Thinking it was left open for me, I leaned over and peeked inside but didn't see anyone, so I rang the doorbell. Right when the bell rang, I heard something drop on the far end of the house. Then it went quiet. There was something about that noise that made me start getting nervous. After a moment, I decided I had a bad feeling about this and was just going to leave. But then footsteps came from behind the door, which then opened slightly wider, revealing a man. "Need something?" he said, half his body still behind the door. Yeah. I was here to look at your TV. We scheduled for 6:30 today." The man looked at me for a second. "All right." He opened the door completely and let me inside. I will say, at that moment, I knew something was wrong. He wasn't acting at all like he was in the emails. I expected a happy old man, not a large, grumpy middle-aged dude. But I was already inside by the time all the alarms were going off in my head. The TV was in the room right next to the door, so he stood there while I looked at it. Yeah, this looks good. I'll take it," I said, not even knowing if it worked or not, but I wanted to get this over with quickly. I held out the money. He looked at it for a moment, then back at me. He reached out and took it, then shoved it in his pocket and without giving me any time to react, grabbed me by the shoulder and shoved me back toward the door, yelling at me to leave. I didn't argue. I sprinted out to my truck and drove away. Not long after, I pulled to the side and called the police to let them know I'd been robbed. The whole time I was just thinking about how stupid they were, meeting me at their own house, robbing me and letting me go knowing that I knew where they lived. But when the police got to the house and called me back, I was in complete shock hearing what they told me. Over that week though, things became more clear. The man I met at the house was not Ryan. The owner of the house was found unconscious in the kitchen. Thankfully he survived, though he had some pretty bad injuries. The man I met at the door was another customer Ryan was meeting from Craigslist to pick up some kitchenware he was also selling. He ended up beating him, robbing Ryan, likely just minutes before I showed up. What's even crazier is that Ryan had sent that man a Google Calendar invite as well, and the man accepted it, probably unknowing that it showed his email, which just so happened to be his first and last name. He was caught within a few days. During this whole case, I got to actually meet Ryan, and he was indeed a happy old man, even despite what happened to him.